Now I'm here. Hello, welcome to the first session today here in Hörsaal 1. I'm Jan Bernot. I'm the session chair for this session. And yeah, we have the modus that 50 minutes is the talk. Afterwards, we have 5 minutes to answer questions. I want to start with the first talk, Sustainable Open Source Research Software by Founding a Startup, LinkAhead story. Thank you for coming.
Thank you so much. Yeah, you said it. We will. I will tell you a bit, and that might be the first disclaimer. This is really like a story that I will tell, not necessarily scientifically sound research, because it is an n=1 example without a control group. We have one company. And the second one, I will be talking a lot about we, which is actually kind of a lie, because I joined the company shortly after it was founded, but I'm not part of the original founders, even though I was also part of the research group from which it originated. So before we talk about the company itself and how everything developed, let's briefly look at what we are talking about. So in this software LinkAhead, it's actually not that important what it is, although I will briefly explain that in a few slides. The important point is that it was under development already for quite some time, since 2011. Some say 2010. It's a bit fuzzy back in time, but since 2011 it has been developed at the Max Planck Institute for Dynamics and Self-Organization in Göttingen. It had been in like stable use since 2016. Was then also published as open source under the AGPL license in 2018. It was then adapted in more and more institutions from 2019, end of 2019, 2020. What it does is basically it is a data management software that is now used in laboratory environments for literature data, but also like in data processing pipelines, in annotating data lakes, in a lot of different contexts. And in 2019, the company IndyScale was founded, to provide commercial services around this open source software, LinkAhead. By the way, some of you might know it still under its old name of ChaosDB, which was under which it was, well, and before that even HardDB, under which it was developed before. Let's briefly look at what it does and what challenges were faced in the original research group. That is mainly we had biomedical experiments that produced a lot of heterogeneous data, also numerical analysis, numerical simulation, and then of course analysis on the data. They were very heterogeneous. They were potentially huge, like from high-speed cameras and optical mapping experiments. And all this data needed to be available, searchable, linked. Provenance information needed to be stored. And then, of course, also research question changed. You all know that. The parameter space in which these experiments were performed changed. Some parameters that initially were thought to be crucial actually turned out to be not so important. And so on. So what we needed actually was a data management system, and back at the time there was none that fulfilled these criteria, and we still think there is no other that actually fulfills it the same way. But anyway, back at the time definitely there was none that supports these flexibility in changing research questions, changing parameter spaces by supporting flexible data models. That allows us to keep data both in the research data management system and on the file system. And my colleague Alexander Schlemmer will, in the afternoon, will give a talk more that addresses this point specifically, how we do that. And yeah, that references entities and in the end supports these heterogeneous sources and the connection between these heterogeneous sources and their analysis. So where it is in, like, if we look into this classical data life cycle, which is not, yeah, you might have seen that already quite often. This cycle from where we go from lab data to experimental result. Where am I here? To maybe experimental data and numerical simulations, analysis, publications, which then might inspire new research. And we all know that this is basically a lie because the unidirection of the arrows is pretty much, yeah, pretty much wrong. And in the end, they all depend on each other. And what we wanted to do is basically have a system that connects to all the different steps. Data from all the different steps goes into the system, can be again obtained, and connects all these different steps in the cycle. So, yeah, we have this research software in the group. And now you can ask why this particular software is well suited for founding a company around it. I mean, there's a lot of research software out there, and probably not all of them are suitable for founding a company. And there was already a relatively high level of professionalization in the group. For just by chance and by good atmosphere, I would say there was a lot of software development skill already in the people in the group. That's very important, I guess. And of course, the software was already being used. It was already published, and it was actually already, even though it came from biomedical research, it was actually already being used in another group from glaciology. So from a completely different field, but there was already an instance in a glaciology group, more interested from people from the neuroscience, other biomedical research groups. So there was like a general interest in the software. Yeah, and then of course, what actually created this situation in which you want to found is the problem that I think everyone knows about very well. Yeah, okay, there's a lot of expertise in the group, and the contracts are ending. There is the threat of a significant brain drain, so what to do in this situation? And of course, what researchers in this situation do, they write a grant. That was rejected in the beginning, at least, and then the idea to found also was a bit fostered by the conditions in the working group that had in another project already like some relatively applied things where medical devices were, the development of medical devices were planned. So there was already some project management know-how, especially one project manager in the group that had a lot of startup experience, who could counsel very well, who had a network that could be used and then could be used mainly for support, not financial, but like consulting, like getting counsel from the Max Planck Society via the Max Planck Innovation thing, from the Südniedersachsen Innovationscampus, the SNIC, which was crucial, the Saarland Accelerator, Incubator, all these institutions gave a lot of very valuable counseling, and one very specific mentorship from another CEO, Johannes Loxen, in a company, Zernet in Göttingen, that actually also provides services for open source and has been there since the beginning of the 90s. So there was someone who actually was doing an open, was doing like, yeah, selling open source in a sense. to have as a role model and have a lot of valuable input from him. So, and then there were, of course, also like the general conditions were also in a way that, okay, 2 of the founders could obtain stipends to finance the first step, and there were 2 awards for the idea for the startup, 2 regional awards in Göttingen, one by the city of Göttingen and one by the region of Göttingen, not the city, and one by the university. Yeah, so that created very well the conditions. And now, talking about founding an open source company, there's a lot of, there's of course a lot of doubt about that, right? Usually you hear relatively often, yeah, open source doesn't sell that well. I think in this group of people, the prejudices are relatively low, but in general, you hear that quite often, yeah, okay, you can't earn money with that. Especially since LinkAhead was already published under AGPL, so a strong copyleft license, creating a situation in which really people said, okay, yeah, no, you can't sell that. But on the other hand, it used already a lot of GPL components, so in a very plain and simple way, you can just say, okay, we didn't really have a choice because yeah, it was already published under AGPL, used GPL components, so what other choice do you have? But also, there was of course a lot of enthusiasm in the initial developers for the open source spirits and in the PIs of the research group too. That I think is also very important. And then, as I said before, the encouragement from the mentor, having a person who was already successful in providing services, in selling services for open source, proved crucial here. And then there was a general trend also towards open source software in the Max Planck Society. That was also very driving. So when we come to founding a company, being all physicists from biomedical research, there are a few obvious challenges, and this is of course one of them. None of the founders and later none of us had the skills and the experience in actually running a company, and what's worse, in sales and marketing. That is something that to this day continues to be a challenge. Then, of course, this results in really acquiring customers. I think for every new company is a challenge, but even more so when you really don't have this experience and these skills. The maybe less obvious challenges that were there is that, okay, even though like people in general say, yeah, we want to have open source, there are still, and I think all of you know that probably, there are, like it's difficult for a public institution to actually buy open source services. There are regulations for buying licenses for MS Office, no worries, but buying services for an open source thing, I mean, it's free, right? So why would I buy it? And actually there it proved very valuable that there are institutions like the Open Source Business Alliance, OSPA, that we are also a member of. Yeah, and then of course in a company you may have these competing interests between what the customer demands and what you want to develop internally. I will come to that on the next slides briefly again. And in the end, also establishing the community for an open source project that has so far been mainly within the research group also is quite challenging. Yeah, and one thing that was a bit surprising in the end was, okay, we thought a bit like research is research. We come from academic, but in principle, industry research shouldn't be that different. So we should be able to sell these things also to industry. And this step was actually so much harder that to this day, most of our customers, the vast bulk of our customers is in academic research, and there are very few other companies that are actually in our customers, because in the end, it's not that similar, maybe. Yeah, so like when you look at the everyday work at the project management scale, these competing interests of customers, users, and the development goals lead to the need for balancing the paid and the unpaid work. Like no one wants to pay for documentation, performance, and all these things. Leads to a need for more efficiency and real structured project management, because things like meeting, they are terribly expensive at some point when you have to pay your own salaries. And this led to us establishing like a Scrum project management, which we edited a lot for like small teams, and I could probably give a whole talk about how to edit Scrum for small teams. But yeah, to summarize the whole thing, like we know we have only one company, and it is less than 5 years that we know, but it's also almost 5 years that we're there, and we're still there, and grew from 3 to 7 employees, and remember how much that would be in like research grant to employ this many developers in a conventional research project. So we have a much higher level of professionalization around the software, and the support, of course. We see that, okay, you actually can have, also we can have a working business model around open source software. And then there's the other thing, we actually have the possibility to design our own ideal working conditions. So we can actually, like, we design how we want to work. Yeah, the challenges that I talked about remain kind of community building, sales, marketing, and expanding beyond the academic research, and maybe also expanding services beyond this one product. So with that, I want to thank you for your attention and wait your questions.